Hey, what's up everyone? I'm going to try to attempt to give some sort of instructional video here on how I created this dash mounted phone mount for my 2015 CBR 650F. So I built this dash mount holder here just so that I would be able to have my phone displayed horizontally so that I would be able to take a look at the screen because in my particular case I was using my iPhone for the screen of my backup camera. So I needed it always to be on and always to be within my line of sight. So I came up with this idea to throw this together. Originally I actually didn't have the phone mount here. It was without the phone mount and just using the Velcro. What I had done was I was taking this Velcro, which is industrial strength Velcro, and I stuck this to the back of this Velcro that you see there, and when I would mount it just Velcro to Velcro, it was fine, and I was able to do any of my freeway rides or anything with no problem at all, not even any mishap. So that did fine, but I wanted to take it a step further and come up with a little holder. So I found this holder online. It came from eBay or Amazon, and what I found was it was for an actual bike mount, and this was on the back of the mount here. This particular piece had like 4 little hooks, and it just slides in, and then it gives you this sort of bar clamp. Well, I removed this all together, and when I did, it's a completely flush surface in the back. And that surface there, I replaced some Velcro on, and that Velcro then was used as added support to keep these two locked together. So just to kind of go over some of the things here of how I put this together, I'm going to show you some of the parts that I used, as well as put it up on the site with the exact links so you can figure out what I used, where to get it. The stuff I used was at Home Depot, and the bike mount here altogether it was like maybe 10-15 bucks. So pretty easy. Time probably took me at least a couple hours to fabricate the pieces. I had to work with it, so I'll go over that and let you know what you need to do. I used a Apple certified phone because in my case I have an iPhone, so just ran my charger directly from here to the battery. That way every time when my phone is up on the front dash and being used, it's always also being charged. So when I get off the bike, I always have a full charge phone. So let's take a look at some of the parts that I used over here. I'll be putting these in the links there so that you will be able to go ahead and get them. So just for illustration purposes, I'm going to show you these pieces. They're not all exact. I did not get a chance to make this video while I was making my exact setup, so I'm just going to step back through this to try to give you some overview on how I accomplished what I have set up. So I took these little straps, these are at Home Depot, and basically what I did was because they have holes pre-drilled through here, I took 2 of these straps and I taped them together. I wanted to do that so that I can make sure that I can keep consistency with my measurements from one to the other. What I did here was I removed the windscreen and took the windscreen off of the bike. After the windscreen was removed, I then started to mock up my holes to measure these 2 distances between this screw and this screw. Borrowing one of the holes that were already drilled in the strap, I then used that to use on one hole, and then got it as close as I could and drilled another hole to align the top measurement. Once I had those 2 marked and I had the 2 straps together, I then measured up from the top of my dash, which say maybe is around this piece of tape, and then I measured about 1.5 inches further. Well, what I did was once I got to the top of my dash on that measurement, let's say it was right here, I then made a bend. My bend that I did was actually in a vise so that I had a nice consistent bend and my angle was correct. After I had my bend and I knew that these 2 pieces were correct, I then had this L-shaped bracket over here, and this bracket was then placed under the windscreen. The windscreen was removed. I had those two screwed in, and then I had 1.5 inches hanging over the front of the dash. With the 1.5 inches that was hanging over the front of the dash, I went and used a part that is similar to this, but slightly longer. In the link, I will put the exact part, but this I'll use for illustration purpose since this is the closest to the example of the original. Then what I did using this part, I would use the hole that was already here and then borrow the hole there, and I would add a screw, and I also added an additional screw. I did this on both sides for obvious reasons to add the stability and strength. Once I had these holes mocked up and knew that it would fit, I double checked and triple checked my connections, making sure that it was always the correct fit of what I wanted. I did all this with the windscreen off, and every time I put the screws back onto the bike, I did not put them on with the windscreen. You want to make sure that you do all of this with no windscreen. All the windscreen should only be brought in at the very end. Okay, so once you get these mounted up, you want to make sure that this lays flat, that you have enough room in the front here to hang down, but not too much to cover your display. You can be the judge of what you think is right. I did about 1.5 inches or so. Then when this was all together, I then made sure after those were all fitting, you wind up having a part similar to this. For illustration purposes, about this size, okay? When you have the two parts that are this size, they'll look similar where they're like this on each side. Obviously, this is not to scale, this is just for illustration. But then what I did was I took shrink tube and I'd place this guy into shrink tube, cut it, and then I'd shrink it. And the shrink tube would then act as a washer and also a protector between your windscreen and where you're mounting it. That way you don't get any damage to your windscreen, and it's also, you know, nice and firm and tight. So when you also have this, you can buy the larger shrink tube, and I also did a shrink tube over the front of this piece. So when I was done, everything was covered in shrink tube, and then it also helped camouflage so it wasn't shining off of the sunlight and so forth. Then once this was all mounted up, I also made sure that I mounted my brackets without the windscreen again, and I let that sit overnight. That way it could form to shape, and I knew that everything was going to sit the way I want. Once that sat overnight, I then unscrewed all 4 screws again, and then simply added my windscreen over those brackets and then did the screws. Obviously just replacing the windscreen. At that point, you should know that everything is going to fit. You don't want to be trying to play with it and adjust things and do all that type of work with the windscreen involved. You should be able to mount this thing fully with no windscreen, and it should be able to sit on the bike locked in with the screws, and you should be able to feel that it's firmly locked in and you have a good visual on how it's going to look. After that, this bracket here, obviously I explained earlier, I used the Velcro to tie it together, as well as some zip ties that you see here. With all of this, I was able to simply add my phone, and this should be able to fit your iPhone 6, iPhone 5, even a Samsung if you have a S3, 4, 5, or 6. Because of the type of adapter that you have here, this allowed me to no longer need the Velcro. So this Velcro that I had before on the phone was actually a case. So if I went somewhere and I didn't want to show the Velcro, I could take off the case and just have my phone. But in any event, you can be the judge of what you want. But in this particular case, I'm just showing you here that here is an iPhone, I think it's a 4 or 5. And you could see that you simply just squeeze the sides, that holds it in nice and firm, and then you have the foam fitting there. So it will hold it at freeway speeds with no problem at all. That's how I was able to accomplish this setup. So hopefully this helps you guys. Best of luck. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm also willing to hear some suggestions on what we could do different. All right, take it easy.